I'll never forget the sound of my own son's voice on Christmas Eve. It wasn't warm, it wasn't welcoming. It was flat, almost rehearsed, when he said, "Dad, we don't have space for you tonight." Just like that, my whole chest caved in. I stood on his porch in Pittsburgh with snow piling on my shoulders, holding a bottle of Maker's Mark bourbon I'd picked up for him. The lights inside were glowing, kids were laughing, carols playing from some Bluetooth speaker. And me? I was the stranger left out in the cold, staring through frosted glass at a family that was supposed to be mine. I worked 40 years at U.S. Steel. My hands still carry the scars, the burn marks, the knuckles swollen from welding 12-hour shifts. I remember living on ramen packets that cost a quarter, just so I could make the $450 monthly payment on his first tuition bill at Penn State. I thought every sacrifice I made was building something solid, a bond stronger than steel. Turns out, bonds can break easier than glass. I walked back to my old Chevy pickup that night, the bourbon bottle heavy in my hands, and all I could hear was my late wife's voice. Martha used to say, "John, one day he'll understand what you did for him." But as I sat behind the wheel, watching their house glow like some Hallmark card, I realized maybe she was wrong. Maybe he never would. The thing is, this wasn't sudden. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. A few months ago, my daughter-in-law had made a joke during Sunday brunch. She said, "Maybe you should think about assisted living, Dad. It might be easier for everyone." Everyone laughed politely, but I felt something twist in my gut. I brushed it off, told myself she didn't mean it. But now, standing outside in the freezing Pennsylvania night, her words hit me like a prophecy. Driving home to my cabin by Lake Erie, 2 hours north, I couldn't stop thinking about the house they live in. That suburban 4-bedroom with the granite countertops and the mortgage they can barely keep up with. They think it's theirs, but the truth? I was the one who sold my Harley-Davidson, my 1978 lowrider, the only thing I'd ever bought for myself, to make the down payment. $20,000 cash from my bike straight into the brick and siding of their so-called dream home. And I never asked for a thank you. I just wanted them safe. But here's the twist no one knows. The cabin I was driving back to that night, the one I built with my own hands after Martha died in 2012, that place is worth more now than the house they're sitting in. 2 acres of cedar and stone, appraised at over $300,000. And the deed? It's in my name alone. I never told them that. I let them believe one day it would pass down automatically, like some family tradition carved in wood. My son even said once when he was 12, sitting on the dock after fishing, "Someday this place will be mine." I laughed, thinking it was sweet, but the older I get, the more bitter that memory tastes. When I pulled up to the cabin, snow crunching under my boots, I went straight to the old gun safe in the corner. Not for a weapon, for the envelope inside, my original will. Martha and I had written it together back in 2008, leaving everything to our boy. At the time, it felt obvious. Who else would we give it to? I sat there by the fireplace, the bourbon finally open, staring at that piece of paper. My son's name printed like some unearned reward. That night, something inside me shifted. They had locked me out of a dinner, but I held the power to lock them out of a lifetime. I realized I wasn't just the old man in the way. I was still the one holding the strings, even if they'd forgotten it. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel weak. I felt steady, like steel cooling in the forge. I didn't call him back. I didn't knock on that door again. Instead, I picked up the phone the next morning, dialed a lawyer in downtown Pittsburgh, and said 7 words that would change everything. I need to update my will immediately. What happened next? Let's just say my son learned too late that every choice has a price, and mine was just getting started. I woke up the next morning with the smell of ash still clinging to my shirt. I had fallen asleep in front of the fireplace, The old will spread across my lap like some cruel reminder of all the years I'd poured into a son who no longer saw me as family. The snow outside had turned to ice overnight. Lake Erie looked like glass, frozen solid. I stood there with a mug of black coffee, my hand shaking a little as I watched the smoke curl out of the chimney. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just betrayed, I was erased. My own son had made it clear he wanted me out of his life, and I was done begging to be let back in. I called the lawyer that morning. His office was in downtown Pittsburgh, a block from where I used to take Martha every Friday for pierogies after her chemo treatments. The familiarity stung, but it also grounded me. The secretary transferred me straight to him. I explained what happened Christmas Eve, how my son had turned me away. There was silence on the other end before he finally said, "Mr. Davis, you understand you have the legal right to change everything. Your assets are yours until the day you pass. They don't get to decide." That was the first twist. For years I'd convinced myself I owed my son everything, that it would be selfish to keep the cabin or the savings for anyone else. But the truth? Legally, morally, financially, it was still mine. Hearing those words lit something in me I thought had burned out long ago. I drove into the city that afternoon. Pittsburgh in January is nothing but gray skies and salt-stained streets. I parked the Chevy in a garage near Liberty Avenue and walked to the lawyer's office with the envelope under my arm. Inside, I signed a fresh will. Every penny in my 401k, every acre of land by Lake Erie, the cabin itself, it all went to my granddaughter, Emily. She was 12 years old, sweet as sugar, the only one who still sent me handwritten Christmas cards with glitter and stickers on them. She deserved better than to grow up thinking betrayal was normal. When the pen lifted from the page, I felt lighter. But I wasn't finished. A week later, I drove back to my son's neighborhood. His SUV, a brand new Ford Explorer with dealer tags still on, sat in the driveway. I couldn't help but remember how he'd begged me last year for help with the down payment. "Just 10 grand, Dad," he said. "I'll pay you back as soon as I can." I gave it to him, no strings attached. That was the second twist. He never paid me back, not a dollar. And now he had the nerve to shut me out of Christmas like I was some charity case. I didn't knock on the door. Instead, I slipped a manila envelope into the mailbox. Inside was a photocopy of the new will. No explanation, no note, just the cold truth. By the time he read it, his world would tilt. That night, my phone rang. His number lit up, buzzing across the kitchen counter. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call, then another. Finally, I picked up. His voice was frantic, desperate. "Dad, what is this? You're leaving everything to Emily? You can't do that. That's not fair." I almost laughed. Fair. Where was fair when I stood outside his house on Christmas Eve? Where was fair when his wife joked about assisted living like I was some burden they couldn't wait to ship off? I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just said, "You wanted me out before dinner. Now you're out forever." Then I hung up. But here's where it gets complicated. The third twist was one I hadn't expected. A few days later, Emily herself called me. She was crying. "Grandpa," she whispered, "Mom and Dad are fighting about you every night. They said if you don't change it back, they'll lose the house." My chest ached hearing her like that. I never wanted to drag her into this war. I just wanted her safe, cared for. I sat in my recliner, staring at the fireplace again, Martha's photo on the mantel. She would have told me to forgive, to find peace. But peace doesn't come easy when the wound is still bleeding. I had to decide, protect the innocent or teach the guilty a lesson they'd never forget. That's when another idea struck me, darker than the rest. It wasn't enough to change the will. If my son wanted to push me out of his life, maybe it was time I pushed him out of his house too. After all, I still had the loan papers, the canceled checks, proof that I had covered the down payment. Without my money, that house never would have been theirs. And sitting there in the dim cabin light, holding those papers in my hands, I realized the game was just beginning. Because what I did next Well, let's just say it would make Christmas Eve look like a kindness. I didn't sleep much after Emily's call. Her little voice still echoed in my chest, breaking me in ways the steel mill never could. 40 years of smoke, fire, and 12-hour shifts hadn't cracked me, but hearing my granddaughter plead through tears nearly did. I sat in that old recliner, papers spread across my lap, the cabin quiet, except for the hum of the furnace. The snow outside had stopped, leaving everything covered in a thick white silence. And in that silence, I made a choice. I couldn't let my son use her as a shield. He had pushed me out of Christmas, treated me like dead weight, and now he was turning his daughter against me to claw back what he thought was his. That wasn't love. That was manipulation. And I had proof, years of it tucked away in a shoebox Martha had once used for her recipe cards. Canceled checks, receipts, bank statements showing my money propping up his life. From the down payment on his house to the 10 grand for his Explorer, every big step he'd taken was on the back of my sacrifices. So here came the first twist. I wasn't just going to cut him out of the will. I was going to make sure the whole neighborhood knew how much of his success was built on borrowed ground. I started making copies, dozens of them, of those old checks. His signature, my withdrawals, the truth in black and white. The next Saturday, I drove down to his block. Families were shoveling driveways, kids building snow forts in front yards. I walked right up to his mailbox and slipped in an envelope. Not to him. Oh no, this one was addressed to whom it may concern. Inside were copies of the checks, a short note in my handwriting. Every brick in this house was bought with money he promised to repay, but never did. I didn't stick around to see the fallout, but I didn't need to. The second twist came faster than I expected. By Monday morning, my phone buzzed with a message from an old neighbor. Your boy's in hot water. Heard he's been living off you all these years. Folks are talking. That was all it took. The image of him as the self-made family man started to crack, and once cracks form, they spread. But the real storm hit when his wife called me, furious. She spat accusations through the phone, blaming me for humiliating them. You've ruined our reputation, she snapped. I almost told her the truth, that they'd ruined it themselves, but instead I stayed quiet, letting her anger wash over me. Every word she said only confirmed what I already knew. They cared more about appearances than about family. Here's where the third twist came in. Buried in that shoebox, beneath the receipts and checks, I found something I had forgotten about. The original loan contract for their mortgage. When they couldn't secure the bank loan back in 2015, I had co-signed. My name was right there, legal and binding. I had the right, if I chose, to pull the rug out from under them completely. The thought made my stomach knot. Was it too far? Maybe. But then I remembered standing in the cold on Christmas Eve, bourbon bottle in hand, while they laughed inside without me. Betrayal has a way of rewriting what too far means. That week I met again with my lawyer. He reviewed the papers, raised his eyebrows, and asked, Do you realize the leverage you hold here? I nodded, though part of me felt sick. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was a reckoning. Still, there was a hesitation, a whisper of Martha's voice telling me to think of Emily. I carried that weight back to the cabin, sat down by the fire, and stared at the documents. My son had no idea the floor beneath him was already mine to pull. The final straw came the next day. Emily called again, but this time her words weren't soft. She said her father told her I was spiteful and jealous of his success, that I was trying to punish the family because I couldn't handle being old and alone. Those weren't her words. Those were his, poured into her ears like poison. And in that moment, I knew the choice had already been made. If he wanted a war, I'd give him one. Not out of bitterness, but out of the simple fact that lies can't be left standing. I placed the mortgage papers back in their folder, slid them into my briefcase, and locked the safe. I poured myself a bourbon, sat back, and whispered into the empty cabin, Let's see how he handles living without the house he threw me out of. Because the next step wasn't just about a will or reputation. It was about taking away the very foundation he stood on. And when I finally pulled that trigger, he'd learned what it felt like to be left out in the cold. I didn't walk into the lawyer's office that day as the man who got turned away from his own son's front porch. I walked in as the man holding the strings, the man who finally realized he didn't have to beg for respect from the very people who lived off his sacrifices. My heart was pounding like a steel hammer on iron, but it wasn't fear, it was clarity. Every page I slid across that polished oak desk was another nail sealing my son's fate. The lawyer adjusted his glasses as I laid out the old loan contract, the canceled checks, the proof of the down payment on his house. His eyebrows shot up and he whistled under his breath. "Mr. Davis, do you realize this doesn't just give you leverage? This gives you control." That word, control, hit me harder than I expected. For years I'd felt like my life was shrinking, like the older I got, the less power I had. My son shutting me out of Christmas had felt like the final blow. But now I saw the truth. Every brick in his foundation rested on me. He just forgot it. The first twist came faster than I thought. The lawyer explained that because I was still listed on certain loan documents, I had the legal right to force a reassessment. If my son missed even one payment, I could step in. Suddenly, the house he and his wife flaunted like a trophy wasn't just theirs. It was hanging by a thread I could cut any time I chose. I drove home with the papers locked in my briefcase, the Chevy's heater blasting against the bitter Pittsburgh wind. And as the miles passed, the anger inside me started to settle into something colder, sharper. This wasn't about rage anymore. This was about justice. The second twist revealed itself a few nights later. I was cleaning out an old filing cabinet when I stumbled on Martha's handwriting, meticulous notes she'd kept about every dollar we'd lent our son over the years, gas money when he was in college, rent when he lost his first job, even the $600 we'd handed him for that engagement ring he bragged about buying with his hard-earned savings. She had kept it all, every cent. Seeing her handwriting, her careful underlines, the way she wrote, "He'll pay us back someday with such hope," it cut deep, but it also gave me everything I needed. I scanned the notes, tucked them with the rest of my evidence, and felt Martha's presence in the room. Not as the forgiving soul she'd always been, but as the woman who believed in fairness. She had trusted he'd make good on his word. He never did. The third twist came when I decided to test him. I called my son one evening, casual as if nothing had happened, and asked how the mortgage was going. He sighed, complaining about how hard it was to keep up with the $2,200 monthly payments, how unfair it was that interest rates had jumped. I asked if he remembered who made that down payment possible. There was silence, then a clipped, "Dad, that's ancient history." "Don't bring it up, ancient history." My blood ran hot. That money was the reason he even had a house to whine about. It wasn't ancient. It was alive in every square foot of drywall, every cabinet, every Christmas tree they put up under that roof without me. That's when I made the call. Not to him, to the bank. I set an appointment to review the mortgage under my co-signer rights. The woman on the line confirmed everything the lawyer had said. "Yes, sir, you're still legally tied to this loan. If payments aren't being met, you absolutely have authority to intervene." Her words landed like a final green light. But here's where the fourth twist came in, one I didn't plan for. When I pulled into the bank parking lot that morning, who did I see storming out but my daughter-in-law? She must have gotten wind of what I was doing, because the look she gave me could have cut glass. She hissed under her breath as we passed, "You'll regret this." "Maybe I will, but not today." Inside the bank, I handed over every piece of documentation I had. The down payment checks, Martha's notes, proof of my ongoing connection to the loan. The manager's face tightened as she flipped through the stack. "Mr. Davis, if you choose to exercise these rights, you can demand full repayment of your contributions or initiate foreclosure proceedings." Foreclosure. The word echoed like a gunshot in my mind. I walked out of that building knowing I wasn't just holding leverage anymore. I was holding a weapon. That night, as I sat by the fireplace in my cabin, Emily called again. Her voice was softer this time, trembling. "Grandpa, Dad said you're trying to take our house away. Is it true?" My hand tightened around the phone. My heart split between the little girl who loved me and the man who betrayed me. I wanted to tell her no, that I'd never hurt her. But the truth was more complicated. Sometimes the only way to teach a lesson is to let the walls fall. I swallowed hard and said, "Sweetheart, some things have to break before they can be built right." And as I hung up, I knew exactly what my next step would be. Because the papers were already signed, the process already in motion. My son had no idea that within weeks, the house he shut me out of might not even be his anymore. What he would do when he realized that? That's the part even I couldn't predict. The weeks that followed felt like watching a slow-motion train wreck. My son had no idea the foreclosure process had already begun. I didn't have to lift another finger. The bank took care of the rest once I provided the documents and proof of my rights as co-signer. At first, there were just a few warning letters in their mailbox. Then came the phone calls. By the third week, the sheriff's office had posted a bright orange notice right on their front door. I drove past the house one evening, Chevy tires crunching on the salted road. There it was, plain as day. Notice of foreclosure proceedings. My son was standing on the porch, crumpling the paper in his fist, while my daughter-in-law yelled loud, enough, for the neighbors to hear. The same neighbors who once believed he was the golden boy, the self-made man. Now they saw the truth, that without me, he had nothing. That was the first real closure. His pride, the image he had built, shattered. But justice wasn't done yet. The second twist came when the bank contacted me directly. They offered me the first right to reclaim the house, since I was still legally tied to the loan. I had a choice: let it go to auction or take it myself. I thought about Martha, about every dollar we scraped together, about the years of sacrifice that had gone unacknowledged, and I signed the papers. The house that had once been my son's became mine, in full, fair and square. When he found out, he called me, voice hoarse from shouting, "You stole my life, Dad! You ruined everything!" I let him rage. Then I told him calmly, "No, son. I just took back what was already mine. You ruined it when you turned your back on me." There was nothing left for him to say after that, but the last twist, the one that truly ended it, came through Emily. A week after the house officially transferred to my name, she showed up at the cabin with a backpack and red-rimmed eyes. She said she couldn't stand the constant fighting at home anymore, the way her parents blamed me for everything while refusing to admit their own failures. She asked if she could stay with me for a while. I felt my throat tighten because I hadn't planned for this. I never wanted her to be collateral damage. But in that moment, I realized the story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about who would carry on the truth, the love, the family name with dignity. And when she curled up on the old couch that night, flipping through Martha's photo albums, I knew Martha would have approved. The foreclosure went through, the house sold under my name. My son and his wife packed up in silence, moving to a rental across town. No more granite countertops, no more boasting to neighbors about what they couldn't afford. Just the quiet humiliation of starting over, knowing everyone knew how it all fell apart. As for me, I kept the cabin and the reclaimed house. But the real victory wasn't in the property or the money. It was in seeing my son face the consequences of his arrogance, in watching the truth come to light after years of being treated like I didn't matter. Looking back, I've learned something I never expected. Forgiveness doesn't always mean letting people off the hook. Sometimes it means letting the weight of their own choices finally land on their shoulders. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just steady, cold, and final. Have you ever been shut out by your own family, or made to feel like you didn't matter after giving everything you had? If you've carried that kind of betrayal, I'd like to hear your story. share it in the comments. Because stories like these shouldn't stay silent. And if mine struck a chord with you, stick around. There are more truths I need to tell.